My sister's husband, the man who became part of our family through marriage, once confessed to my wife that he had deep feelings for her. That single revelation triggered a cascade of painful truths that shook everyone close to us. Just yesterday, without any warning, he messaged my wife asking if she could join him for a quiet lunch. He claimed there was something important he needed to discuss with her in person. When my wife mentioned the invitation to me, she appeared confused but not particularly alarmed. "Do you think it's about your sister?" she asked, her forehead creased with concern. "Maybe they're going through a rough patch and he wants another woman's point of view." I thought the whole thing felt strange. He had never directly asked my wife to meet alone like this before, though he frequently messaged her and other relatives about everyday matters, so I didn't dwell on it too much. We've always been a tight family, and reaching out for support during difficult times wasn't unusual. "Go ahead and meet him," I said, pushing aside my faint discomfort. My wife decided to accept and arranged to see him at a busy cafe close to her workplace the following day. The next morning, while preparing for work, she brought it up again. "I still have no idea what he wants to talk about," she said, a trace of anxiety in her tone. I calmed her down, telling her it was likely nothing major. "Just hear him out, and if it's something we need to help with, we'll handle it as a team," I assured her. The cafe was crowded with the typical lunch rush, and my wife felt safer in such a public place. She arrived early and chose a table by the window so she could watch the door. He showed up shortly after, appearing more anxious than she had ever seen him. They started with small talk, work, the children, the usual topics, for a few minutes. But as soon as their meals arrived, he drew a long breath and launched into the real reason he was there. He began by complimenting her appearance, saying how lovely she looked that day. At first, she assumed it was simple courtesy, but he continued. He told her she had always been the brightest part of his world, that she stirred emotions in him he had never experienced before. It was love from the very first moment he saw her, he said, his voice unsteady. "I've been in love with you since the day we met. If you were with me, I would cherish you the way you truly deserve. I'd give you everything you've ever wanted." My wife sat frozen, unable to process his words. This man, married to my sister, father to their 2 young children, was openly declaring his love for her. He pressed on with lavish promises of how wonderful life could be together, claiming he had bottled up these emotions for years, watching her from a distance and growing convinced they were destined for each other. She tried to stop him, to tell him he was making a terrible mistake, but he spoke over her, as though he had rehearsed this confession countless times. To be clear, he had always shared a warm, friendly connection with my wife. Our families spent a lot of time together because we're so close. He was the fun uncle to our children, the reliable guy at every cookout and holiday gathering. He messaged my wife often, but it was always about ordinary things. Schedules for the kids, upcoming family plans, nothing suggestive or alarming. He also texted and called my mother regularly. They shared an easy banter, and none of us ever suspected anything inappropriate. He seemed like a solid, trustworthy person we could always count on. Hearing my wife describe what happened felt like a physical blow. My wife refused to let him continue. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping harshly against the floor, and left the cafe. Trembling, she called me immediately and recounted everything. While we were still on the phone, his messages began flooding in. First came apologies. He hadn't meant it. It was just a passing infatuation. He was sorry for upsetting her. But the harm was already done. She left work early and came home so we could talk face to face, her phone constantly vibrating with his calls and texts. I suggested she answer one call and put it on speaker so I could listen. He was sobbing, pleading with her not to tell my sister. He repeated that it was a mistake, that he had misread her signals, that he believed she shared his feelings. He pointed to a moment from the previous weekend when we were all together. He thought my wife had flirted with him during a brief time alone in our kitchen. My wife is known for her sharp, teasing humor, and I can see how someone might misinterpret that. But this went far beyond any reasonable misunderstanding. That he asked if she had told me, and when I confirmed she had, since the call was on speaker, he began begging me as well, desperate for us to keep it secret. This continued for some time, with him pleading while we listened in silence. My biggest question was whether he had ever been unfaithful to my sister before. He swore he hadn't, even invoking his children's lives, insisting it had only ever been about my wife. He said I should understand. It was her and only her. I ended the conversation there, telling him I wouldn't decide anything that night and would speak to him the next day. We were left reeling, unsure how to proceed. My wife wanted to drive straight to their house and tell my sister everything. But the thought of destroying my sister's family made me feel sick. Imagining the impact on my nieces was heartbreaking. I knew honesty was the right path, but I also worried about my wife. It wasn't her fault at all, yet I feared resentment from parts of the family. Even if my sister forgave him and stayed, I couldn't imagine us all gathering the way we used to. This could fracture everything. I didn't care about him anymore. He had tried to ruin my marriage, but I cared deeply about everyone else. Update. Everyone who said last night that we couldn't delay telling my sister was absolutely right. Just after midnight, my sister called me sounding distraught, saying she needed to share something urgent. My stomach dropped as she explained that her husband had come to her in tears, claiming my wife had attempted to start an affair with him. He had completely reversed the story, placing all blame on my wife. Couldn't believe it. I immediately told her that wasn't true and said we were coming over right away. This required an in-person conversation, not a phone call. I hung up and called my parents next. I woke them and gave a brief, urgent summary of events. My father was livid. My mother was stunned but firm. They agreed to go to my sister's house to watch the kids and provide whatever support she needed. Then I phoned my younger brother. He answered groggily, but quickly grew alert as I explained. He promised to come to our house and stay with our children so they wouldn't be alone. His steady presence would help keep things normal for them. Meanwhile, my wife was already preparing to leave, her face pale and tense. She dreaded the confrontation but knew it was unavoidable. We rushed out, and the drive to my sister's felt endless. The car was silent, both of us absorbed in heavy thoughts. When we arrived, the atmosphere was even worse than expected. My sister was on the front porch with her husband when we pulled up. He looked defeated, head bowed, shoulders sagging. He knew we had the texts and voicemails, irrefutable proof of what he had done. I have no idea what he thought he would gain by waking my sister in the night with his fabricated version. Perhaps he hoped to control the narrative and save himself, but it backfired completely. As we approached, the air felt thick with tension. My wife was shaking, her expression a mix of fury and pain. Without speaking, she handed her phone to my sister. My sister took it, her hands remarkably steady, though her eyes blazed with anger and hurt. She scrolled through the messages, her face growing harder with each one. Then she played the voicemails, his confessions and her clear rejections. Before she could respond, he broke down sobbing. This was a man who charged into burning buildings for a living, fearless in the face of danger. Seeing him collapse like this was almost unreal. His cries were raw and guttural, filled with remorse and terror. My sister remained stone-faced, her resolve unbreakable. She waited silently until he quieted, her stillness more powerful than any outburst. When the sobs finally subsided, she spoke calmly and coldly. "Pack a bag and leave. I can't even look at you right now." He tried to protest, to plead, but she shut him down instantly. "Stop. There's nothing you can say to fix this." She turned away from him, walked to my wife, and embraced her tightly. It was a powerful moment of unity between them, a small anchor amid the chaos. They had been close friends long before any of this, and their bond held strong. That left me standing with him. He was a mess, face swollen, eyes pleading for some mercy I couldn't give. He started to speak, voice breaking, but I stopped him. "You need to go," I said firmly. "This is the consequence of what you did." He nodded numbly and went inside to gather his things. My sister stayed with my wife, talking softly, supporting each other. The rest of the night blurred into discussions and planning. We all surrounded my sister, helping her sort through immediate next steps and shield the children as much as possible. My sister began asking my wife questions, trying to understand why her husband believed there was any chance. She insisted their marriage had seemed fine, nothing out of the ordinary. My wife, now crying openly, struggled to make sense of it. "There's nothing hidden," she said through tears. She gave my sister her phone again, and together they reviewed every message exchanged over the past 2 years. They examined each one closely for anything inappropriate, but found nothing. My wife had simply been herself, playful, teasing, warm. She banters the same way with my mother and my younger brother. It's just her personality. The only moment my wife could recall that might have been misinterpreted was from the recent weekend gathering. She and he had both reached for the fridge simultaneously, jokingly competing to get there first. He let her go ahead but then reached around her waist slowly to grab a drink. At the time it felt slightly off, but she dismissed it, not wanting to overreact. She wondered now if her silence had somehow encouraged him. My sister listened carefully, then reassured her firmly, "This isn't on you." My wife nodded, though the guilt lingered. After reviewing everything, it was obvious there had never been any mutual interest, no secret signals. My wife's natural friendliness had been twisted in his mind into something it wasn't. The pain of realizing one person's delusion had caused so much damage was overwhelming, but at least my sister's trust in my wife remained unshaken. Later, my sister, fueled by anger and betrayal, decided to search his MacBook for anything else she needed to know. Her hands shook as she guessed passwords. On the third attempt, she gained access. She began digging through folders, and it didn't take long to uncover something deeply disturbing. Hidden in an unassuming folder were hundreds of photographs of my wife. They spanned years, and every image focused solely on her. Never group shots, never ordinary family candidates. My sister clicked through them, her fury shifting to chilled horror. One group stood out. From a couple's trip to the Caribbean several years earlier. It was a child-free getaway, and my wife had felt relaxed enough to wear a bikini, which she rarely did. There were roughly 50 photos of her in that swimsuit, all taken secretly. My sister's face drained of color as she realized he had been covertly photographing my wife for years, building a private collection. The knowledge that he had been nursing this secret fixation at every family event was sickening. "Is this grounds for a restraining order?" she asked quietly, voice trembling. The situation had shifted from painful to genuinely alarming. She called us over to see. My wife covered her mouth in shock, completely unaware. My sister, now mixing rage with profound hurt, began discussing practical next steps. Legal options, protecting the kids, possibly a restraining order. We were all staggered by this revelation. The person we thought we knew, trusted husband, father, family member, had revealed a dark, obsessive side no one suspected. Sadly, the ordeal continued. My sister agreed to speak with him again the following night, determined to hear the complete truth. She insisted my wife join via FaceTime to prevent any further distortion of facts. She recorded the entire call. I listened off camera, heart racing with anger and apprehension. As soon as it connected, the strain was obvious. He looked drained, eyes puffy from crying. He began haltingly, but soon the full confession spilled out, more extensive than anyone expected. He admitted the obsession had lasted years. "It started the very first day I saw her," he whispered. He explained it was at an early group gathering when my sister brought her new boyfriend to meet friends. My wife and I were dating then, but he encountered her before meeting me. Initially, he thought it was just physical attraction, a harmless crush he could ignore. But as he spent more time around her, it deepened into fixation on her warmth, her humor, her entire presence. He described stolen glances, moments he cherished while she simply lived her life. He claimed he tried to bury the feelings, telling himself they were innocent, but they only intensified. He engineered reasons to be near her, offering help at family functions, texting about minor things. It built gradually until he convinced himself confession was necessary, deluding himself that she might reciprocate. My sister listened without interrupting, face rigid with suppressed emotion. My wife grew increasingly distraught hearing the depth and duration of his obsession. When he finished, silence hung heavily. My sister finally spoke, voice like steel. "What made you think she would ever leave my brother for you?" He stumbled over excuses, again citing misinterpreted moments. At that point my wife and sister unleashed their fury. Shouting, swearing, raw pain erupting. My wife ended the call abruptly, worried about my reaction. She turned to me, eyes filled with fear. "It was completely one-sided. I never doubted that," I told her. Even if she had once found him attractive physically, I knew she would never act on it. She had made her stance on loyalty crystal clear early in our relationship. I remembered a morning years ago when I watched her dress silently, admiring her. She caught me, smiled playfully, then grew serious. "Never mess this up, or you'll never have it again." She meant it completely. Trust, once broken with her, was nearly irreparable. reflecting on his arrogance. He always carried himself with confidence, but I never realized the extent of his self-importance that he believed he could succeed here. Was staggering that I spoke with my sister later when emotions had settled slightly. She was unwavering, focused on protecting her children. She planned to consult a lawyer first thing Monday to explore limiting his access. He's completely unmoored from reality, she said firmly. Her priority had shifted entirely to her kids' well-being. Anyway, he returned to the house yesterday, not because she wanted reconciliation, but because legally she couldn't bar him yet. The environment is strained and cold, heavy with unspoken resentment. They are finished, and I believe he finally accepts that. His eyes look empty, as if he recognizes everything is lost. The lawyer informed my sister that the documented behavior, texts, voicemails, hidden photos, strengthens her case for primary or full custody. He isn't contesting it. He seems too defeated to fight. My sister will be all right. She's tougher than she appears, and whatever affection remained has evaporated. She moves with purpose, centered on her children's future. She isn't devastated in the way one might expect. Instead, she seems liberated by the clarity. The children haven't been told yet. They sense the tension, children always do, but not the details. He was rarely home when they were awake anyway, often sleeping at the station after long shifts. His absence was already their norm. Still, the eventual truth and change in family structure will be difficult. My sister has already consulted a child therapist to prepare for the conversations ahead. She's ready to step fully into both parental roles. For now, he occupies the guest room, a quiet, diminished presence in a home that no longer welcomes him. He appears resigned, lacking energy for resistance. It's pitiful, but my compassion is minimal. Some friends speculate there must have been other women, that such intense obsession couldn't be limited to one person. But from everything uncovered, it appears singularly focused on my wife. After the truth emerged, my wife blocked his number for her own peace. Yet the same night he returned home, he created a new email address and sent her a long message. It opened with an apparent apology, but quickly devolved into more unsettling content. He claimed he never finished his thoughts at the cafe, then poured out pages detailing everything he adored about her. Her smile, her energy, her kindness. It was deeply uncomfortable to read his fixation spelled out so explicitly. He again insisted on mutual chemistry, describing imagined tension that existed only in his head. He devoted a substantial portion to criticizing me. My looks, my personality, implying I failed to satisfy or deserve her. The intent was clearly to erode my confidence and create doubt. Reading it felt like a direct attack, exposing how his obsession had bred contempt for me as the barrier to his fantasy. Rather than insecurity, it strengthened my determination to shield my wife and family from his instability. We forwarded the email to my sister and her attorney. Further proof of his unhealthy mindset, potentially enough to have him removed from the home permanently. My wife and I are taking things day by day. The outpouring of support from friends and extended family has been crucial as we process this nightmare. Finally, my wife is struggling but improving gradually. She carries some guilt for having been relaxed and open around him. To clarify, my wife is strikingly beautiful and often attracts attention from men, but she is usually careful about boundaries. With family, however, she let her guard down because she felt completely safe, never imagining he would violate that trust. Thankfully, her relationship with my sister remains strong, with no blame or bitterness between them. We will heal in time, though it won't be quick. My deepest worry has always been for my sister and her children. The fallout from his actions will affect them profoundly. Protecting their emotional security became everyone's focus. In situations like this, swift and decisive action is vital. We gathered evidence, confronted the truth immediately, and sought legal guidance to safeguard everyone. Hesitation could have allowed further damage. What are your thoughts on this entire situation? Feel free to share your comments below. Thank you for reading and listening to this difficult family story.